What's up guys, welcome back to the Utah Airguns channel. Today we are talking about something that is very important to your air rifle's accuracy or your centerfire's accuracy for that matter, and it is levels. It is especially important for air rifles because we're typically shooting slower projectiles than you are with centerfires, so that means that your projectiles are kind of arcing more than a normal projectile would out of a centerfire. You're not shooting as flat. So we're going to cover some of the options that we have available on our website, and then we're going to go and demonstrate how important they are even just at 35 yards in our own range. We have our range impact here. This one is in 25 cal, shooting high 800s with 25 cal pellets, just to kind of demonstrate how little of cant can affect your shots even at 35 yards. Before we get into it, talking about the importance of bubble levels, it's very important to make sure that your scope is mounted correctly, because if your scope's not level, it's not really going to help if your gun is level. So one of the benefits of buying from us is when you buy a gun and a scope is you have the option to have it mounted and zeroed, and we mount it and level it perfectly. If you didn't buy it from us, you can get one of our Air Marksman scope leveling kits that will help you get your scope leveled perfectly to your gun, and you can use that on future guns as well as centerfire or air rifle. They're very easy to use and very precise. After you've mounted your scope properly and it's all nice and level, you need to have one of these scope levels. And these aren't all the options, these are just a few that I grabbed. One of them is an option that mounts to your scope, and this one is very important that your scope, these are mounted properly, because you can obviously see how it would be easy to not be I'm struggling, dude. You can see how easy it would be to add a little bit of cant to this level when you're mounting it. So make sure your scope is level, your gun is level, have another level on your gun. It's another application you could be using. One of our scope mounting and leveling kits is so that you could get this leveled up properly if you don't have any excess rail space. We have this Eagle Vision level, just screws right into an Eagle Vision mount, so that's super nice. You know that's level because they've done all the work for you. We have this Hawk mount, which mounts to your rail. They have pick and dovetail options, and that's another good one that you don't really have to think about. You know your level, you know your scope rail is level, and so long as your scope is properly mounted and leveled, this one's going to be solid. This one is really cool. This is an MDT send it level, mounts to your rail, and it's nice and very fast because you don't really have to look directly at it to know that you're level. It's more of a, you just know the colors, you know which way do you need to cant your gun to get level, so it can be more off in your peripherals and you can just pay attention to the color. This is something I use in competition a lot, just because, you know, I don't want to have to be breaking my cheek weld or even moving my eyes for that matter. I can stay on target, just pay attention to the color. As soon as it's green, I can squeeze my shot off. So these are super nice. Obviously, quite a bit more expensive than the other options. I think our most affordable option here is this Hawk one. They're about 20 bucks on our website. When you're building out an air rifle from us, make sure you're adding this to it. Even if it's just this one, I use this exact level on quite a few of my guns, and it's awesome. It's worked great for me. Really can't be beat for 20 bucks. When you get your rifle, it doesn't matter how expensive the rifle is. In my opinion, every rifle, centerfire or not, or air rifle, it needs a level on it, because when you go to zero your gun, if you zero and you're kind of consistently canted to the left, especially if you get an air rifle and you're zeroing it past 35 yards out to 50 or 100 yards, and you're consistently left, and then you go and zero it with that, you're going to think you're zeroed, but you're actually canted to the left or the right, or whichever way you were kind of trending. Then your rifle's going to be off to the left, and then if you go to compete, if you go to hunt, and you're making wind calls or using any kind of ballistic calculator, your wind calls are going to be off. It's just going to really mess everything up in the future. So moving into like the application and shooting with bubble levels for air rifles. So air rifles are kind of like simulating longer ranges with a centerfire, just because you're lobbing a projectile with more of an arc at shorter distances than you would be with a centerfire, and that's why these bubble levels are so important. Without a bubble level, you don't know how much you're canting your gun with every shot. So your correction that you're taking from each like splash you're getting on target isn't going to be very accurate. So say I'm trying to shoot even just 100 yards with a pellet shooter. Say with this exact rifle, I'm shooting 800, high 800 FPS, so that at 100 yards, I'm lobbing that projectile pretty far. And even if there's no wind at play and I think I'm level and I'm consistently hitting left or right by a good amount, I might be thinking that there's wind. I might not even be considering that my gun isn't level. And so I'm going to be chasing that impact every time, and I'm wondering why I'm hitting right and then all of a sudden I'm hitting left, because to the naked eye with just your reticle, even those few degrees of cant is going to be putting you off, like it could be putting you off almost a couple feet at 100 yards with a projectile like this going that slow and with how much arc is in play with that shot. And then not to mention, if you add in wind, then that means if you are running a ballistic calculator and you're not level, you could have a very good wind call, but you're not level, so you could be canting your gun into the wind, and so that cant is going to eat that wind call, and you could be hitting like center, but there's actually wind, so your next shot, you're not as canted as your next time, but you made that good wind call, and now you're, you know, a foot, 2 feet to the left. So a level is just taking out that kind of human variable. Like we can get it pretty level, but those few degrees are where it's really going to matter in the consistency, and especially getting a first round impact if you're hunting. Like I love shooting really far with a hopped up slug gun. My impact's shooting 34 grain slugs at about 1040. Even at like 400 yards when I'm shooting at prairie dogs, I need to know that I'm perfectly level, especially if I want to get a first round impact on that prairie dog, because obviously there's going to be wind at play. Even just a 2 or 3 mile an hour wind is going to put me off. So if I'm not level, my wind call is just moot, not even going to be worth trying to make that wind call, because that little cant is either going to eat my wind call or going to severely exaggerate it. So again, this whole video is just going to be me redundantly saying you need a bubble level for if it's on a no-dose or a $5,000 impact setup. This is going to make your shooting experience so much better. So now that I've drilled that into your heads, we're going to go down in our range. We're going to hook up a scope cam. We're going to put this hawk level on our impact. I'm just going to demonstrate that even at 35 yards, it's very hard to notice how little cant you're putting into the gun. You probably won't even be able to tell through the scope cam footage, but then we'll show that shot looking at our level, and you'll see that that level could be even just hanging out of that little margin, and we'll show you how much that's going to put you off at even 35 yards. Who's calling me? Unknown. Let's answer it. Hello, unknown. This is Nancy. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Have you ever played the lottery before?
I have. I've won millions of dollars. I've got a fat bank account.
And how much exactly you've won?
1.3 billion.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But you're speaking with the manager at the lottery, okay?
Okay. Did I win? Again?
Definitely. That's the reason we're calling. That's the reason I'm wondering.
Are you going to give me my money then?
Definitely. You know what you've won?
What have I won?
Yeah, you've won $5 million.
$5 million. A Mercedes Benz? Here. Since I already won $1 billion, I'm going to give that to you. What's your name? All right, let's go down and shoot this gun. All right, guys, we're in the range. We've got our range impact set up. Again, we're shooting a 25 cal pellet, kind of high 800s. We've got our scope cam set up. And one thing I did that I also want to mention is I kind of exaggerated putting my target like not level. So you'll see it when we show the scope cam footage, because some of you, when you're shooting, you might be tempted to level your crosshairs with the vertical lines of your target or your target stand or a fence post or whatever you have out there that's going to kind of give you almost like a plumb bob to go off of. And that's something that you don't want to be doing, because it'll look right in your scope, but the shot will obviously tell you that that was wrong. So we'll do that. I'll show you how off level this will be when I line it up and I'll take a shot. And at these distances with this pellet, we're only shooting 35 yards. It's only going to put me left or right maybe 1/4 of an inch, but it is noticeable, and it is something that will throw off your zero a lot. So even in here, when you're zeroing without a level, if you're canted, it's going to throw you off a little bit, and that will obviously be exaggerated when you try and shoot those farther shots. So let's get right into it. I'll hit record on my camera, make sure that's rolling. I'm going to get on target. First shot I'm going to send a shot that's level, just so you guys know that this gun is shooting good and all zeroed. And you can see in this scope cam how canted the target is. Doesn't really look good in the scope, but when I look at my level, we're all good. So there's a perfect shot. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to line up my crosshairs with the vertical lines of the target. So it looks pretty good in the scope. And you obviously have other reference points that make it not look good. And this is obviously very not level. I'll take the shot. And you can see that threw me almost 0.5 mils to the left. And obviously that's a very exaggerated amount of cant, but that is something that you could encounter in the field if you're trying to level off any kind of feature out in your range, whether it's the target stand, a fence post, or anything. So that threw me off quite a bit, and you could tell how canted you were in here. So it might not be that exaggerated, but that's a miss if I go past like anything past 50 yards. It's going to be 6 to 8 inches to the left. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to exaggerate the level of cant that much. We'll kind of do different amounts. So Cole's going to keep an eye on our bubble level here, and our side shot cam's a little bit in the way. Right there is level, and there's other bubble levels that will have a tighter kind of margin, and you obviously want to have that as centered up as possible. But I don't think it's going to be that drastic of a difference at this distance. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cant it to the right so the bubble is just barely starting to peek out of that little margin. And I'm going to send a shot. Okay, yeah, see? That was not as much as when we tilted it to the left, but that's still about 1/10 right. And that's just barely starting to peek out of there, of that margin of error. So I'm going to go up to the top target now. And I'm going to do the same thing to the left. Actually, I'm going to go right. I can't quite see. I'm going to stay in the margins this time and just see if that's going to push me to the right at all. I'm being very careful to keep that level on the right side or the left side, so I'm canted to the right. Okay, that wasn't quite enough to show how much that cant is going to exaggerate at this distance, but obviously at a farther distance, that's going to start trending to the right. So I'm going to shoot one more shot. I'm going to cant it far to the right again, and not as exaggerated, because last time I was obviously like maxed out in the level just to line it up with the target, but I'm not going to go that far this time. And I'm going to go not quite level with how canted the target is, but I'm going to go for this squirrel in the little eye target and see how far that pushes me to the left. Yep, see? That's a miss. On a squirrel of that side, that put it off his nose, and I was going for his eye. And another thing that you'll see if you're shooting out to distance, and this will be a good kind of tell that it's not the wind or the gun's velocity that's throwing you off, that it's the cant. You'll start to see, if you're shooting left and right, if your elevation's kind of off, you'll start to see your group will kind of make an arch, because you're shooting, every time you shoot, those pellets are arcing away and down, and so they'll start to make kind of almost like a half moon shape in your paper, and this will obviously show up if you're shooting like 50 yards or farther. But I have had a couple people come to me with this problem, and they're wondering why my gun is doing this. They're thinking their velocity is off because they're getting elevation variances, but they're also getting these windage variances. And the first thing I always ask is, do you have a bubble level? And they say no. And I'm like, that's your problem. Your gun's consistent. It's just you're not being consistently level enough. That kind of half moon shape won't really present itself at this distance, but like I said earlier, 50 yards and past is where you'll really start to see that kind of half moon, half circle shape group. See, I keep losing my train of thought. I'm sleep deprived. My kids keeps getting up at night. That 50 yards and past is where you'll start to see that half circle shaped group, because those shots are starting to kind of travel more off rather than flying like at a perfect up and down. They're flying kind of where you were canted to, left or right. So I'm going to take just a few more shots just to continue to demonstrate the concept. So I'm going to cant it to the right again, just so you can see. I'm going to just split the bubble now. I'm not maxed out in the level, but it's still very, very little. I'll go for the crow in the eye. See, that hit him in the beak. So at this distance, if I had my target level, that amount of cant would almost be imperceptible. And that's something that obviously out in the field when if you're shooting, if that crow was on a branch, you really have nothing to reference as far as what is perfectly level. And that would have kind of been a nasty shot. He would have shot his beak off. You'd have to shoot him again. So that's why a level is very important, because you also want to be an ethical hunter. You want to be taking those good instant kill shots, and a level is going to help you do that. So let's just do one more, just to drive this concept home a little more. I'm going to go for the rat, but I'm going to level with the target more. I'm not going to go off on my level. Yep, see, that one was even more. Again, just like our first shot when I tilted it quite a bit to the left, that shot was almost half a mil to the left. And at this distance, that's probably just over half an inch, which is quite a bit at 35 yards. That's gonna make you chase your zero. You're gonna be moving your windage all over the place, because this shot, I might've been canted to the left. I go and change my scope, make that adjustment, get back on, and now I might be canted to the right. So let's just demonstrate that. Say I'm chasing my zero. I just made that correction, and I go back, and now I'm canted to the right. See, and since now I hit almost the same distance to the right, but on my last shot, I would have made that adjustment in my scope. I would have adjusted 0.5, and now I'd be like almost like an inch and a half off. So again, bubble levels are extremely important, and I say they are essential to any gun that you get. So buy a bubble level with your gun, put a bubble level or any kind of level, send it level, a digital kind like I showed you earlier. Put that on every rifle. Doesn't matter the distance, it's only going to improve your shooting experience, your accuracy, your first round impact percentage, and your first round kill shot percentage. So yeah, bubble levels, extremely important. Buy one. All right, so we brought our target back. So this was our first shot, just to show that we confirmed our zero, that the gun is shooting really good. And this was our second shot. We'll show here in a minute how imperceptible that amount of tilt is without the bubble level. And that threw us probably just over a quarter an inch left. Then we went up here just to show a little bit of cant, what it does. And now that I'm looking at the target, that's probably still just the left side of the box. And that obviously would have presented itself more drastically at distance farther than 35 yards. And then we went down here, canted it a little bit more to the right. We didn't can it as much on this one, but it still threw it 1/8 of an inch. Did here on this with the squirrel. We canted it as far as we did here, and that's a miss on an animal like that. Then went over to the rat, and we kind of did the extremes of both sides. And we also did that with the crow. And the crow was very minuscule of an amount of tilt, and that would have obviously kind of been a nasty shot. Probably would have still killed it, but it wouldn't have been ideal, especially if you like to take headshots. A bubble level is absolutely essential. So what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna have Cole, I'll move this out of the way. I'm gonna have Cole go stand right here, and I'm just gonna show you how imperceptible the amount of cant was that we were putting into the gun. So let's look, so our first shot when we were canted all the way to the left, where we threw it almost 1/2 an inch to the left, I'm gonna cant it to exactly where we had it. It was just barely maxed out in the level. That's where we had it. And looking at the gun, and like without the bubble, that looks pretty good. you wouldn't have been really considering that your gun was that far to the left to make the shot go that far. And now you can see that in the level, it's very obviously a lot of cant to the left because the bubble is it goes to the high side of the level. So now I'm gonna tilt it to the amount that we had on this crow shot that still would have kind of been a hit, but not ideal. I'm gonna tilt it to the right and show where it was, because this one was even less. I'll just get it to where it sits right there. So now, like, this does look better than the first shot, and it obviously is. But Cole, if you come look at the level, you can see it, that bubble is just barely starting to peek out of kind of the left margin of error for that level. And even that amount of cant threw us a pretty minuscule amount at 35 yards, but that still equates to not an ideal shot on an animal. So guys, I know this has been kind of a repetitive, redundant video, but bubble levels are extremely important. This kind of carries over from what I do outside of work. I shoot a ton of long range. I just killed a deer at 1,000 yards, and I absolutely was paying a lot of attention to my bubble level, and that made that shot possible. So they're especially important in air rifles because you are getting that amount of kind of max ordnance, that high of an arc at much shorter distances. So that little bit of cant, as we demonstrated here on paper, could mean the difference between a first round ethical kill and a complete miss or wounding an animal. So bubble levels, they're very affordable. There's really no reason why you shouldn't have them. This Hawk one that we were using is only 20 bucks on our website. We showed you a couple other options, and we have more options that are available on their website, so go check them out. But guys, thanks for watching. Leave some comments or questions down in the comment section. I will be answering them, and let us know what you want to see next. If there's any other informational videos you want us to do on air guns or shooting or whatever else, if there's some entertaining idea you have that you want to see us do with air rifles. But don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.